The sunrise on Trinivir's horizon cast a pale blue glow across the Galactic Combat Academy's training grounds. The moon's thin atmosphere created a peculiar light that made the massive titanium structures gleam with an almost ethereal quality. It was recruitment day, and beings from across the galaxy had converged on this remote outpost for one purpose: to become elite warriors of the Intergalactic Defense Force. Among the crowd of varied species stood a human female. Unlike her counterparts, who were adorned in the latest exosuits and neural enhancers, she wore only the standard-issue training uniform, a simple gray jumpsuit with reinforced joints. No tech additions, no performance enhancers, not even the basic gravitational compensators that most off-worlders utilized. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight, regulation bun, and her eyes, a deep brown that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, scanned the assembly ground with quiet intensity. She hadn't spoken a word since arrival. Not during processing, not during orientation, not even when the Quantari delegation had accidentally stepped on her foot with their massive, stone-like appendages. She had simply moved aside, nodded once, and resumed her position. The morning air carried a metallic tang as the Academy's atmospheric processors cycled through their daily purification routine. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of star systems stood in formation, their diverse physiologies creating a living mosaic of galactic biodiversity. Six-limbed hexapods stood beside crystalline Lysarians. Gaseous Vorelians contained in pressure suits floated next to reptilian Saurians. And among them all, a handful of humans, considered by many to be the galaxy's newest and least impressive spacefaring species. "Attention!" The voice boomed across the parade ground, amplified not by technology but by the natural vocal capacity of Drill Sergeant Zoran, a massive Taurian whose scaled skin rippled with muscular definition. His four eyes, positioned for optimal peripheral vision, narrowed as he surveyed the new recruits. "Welcome to the first day of the rest of your miserable lives," he growled, stalking between the perfectly aligned rows of cadets. "I don't care what genetic advantages your species thinks it has. I don't care about your family lineage or your academic achievements. Here, you are nothing until you prove yourselves worthy of becoming a defender of galactic peace." He stopped abruptly in front of the human female, his massive frame towering over her. Despite the intimidating presence, she didn't flinch or avert her gaze. "Name?" he demanded. She opened her mouth, but her voice emerged barely above a whisper. "Louder! Cadet!" Zoran bellowed, his secondary voice chamber activating to produce a sound that made several nearby cadets wince. "Maya Reyes, sir." Her voice remained soft but clear. "I can't hear you. Eartha, speak up or ship out." "Maya Reyes, sir," she repeated, her volume unchanged. Zoran's facial ridges darkened, a Taurian sign of irritation. "Do they not teach proper vocal projection on your primitive planet? Perhaps humans aren't physically capable of proper military communication." From nearby, a reptilian cadet snickered. Verex, a saurian with gleaming copper scales and retractable claws, leaned slightly forward. "Is Earth sending children to train now? She looks like she could barely lift a standard plasma rifle." The comment drew scattered laughter from several cadets. Maya's expression remained unchanged, her gaze fixed forward. Zoran moved on, but not before giving her a dismissive grunt. "Physical assessment begins in 30 minutes. I suggest you find your voice by then, Cadet Reyes, or you'll find yourself on the first transport back to your gravity well of a planet." As the formation disbanded to prepare for assessments, Maya moved with methodical precision to her assigned quarters. The room was Spartan, a single bunk, a storage unit, and a small workstation. She placed her minimal belongings into the storage compartment and retrieved a worn paper notebook from her duffel, an anachronism in an age of neural interfaces and holographic displays. She wrote something in it with a pencil, another relic, before tucking it away and beginning a series of stretching exercises. Her movements were fluid, economical, and precise. There was no wasted energy, no flourish, just pure functional movement honed through countless hours of practice. Nearby, her roommate, a crystalline Lycarian named Isuri, whose translucent body refracted light in hypnotic patterns, observed with curiosity. "Why do you not use the gravity compensators?" Isuri's voice chimed like delicate glass. "Trinivir's gravity is 1.2 times Earth standard. It must be uncomfortable." Maya completed her stretch sequence before acknowledging the question with a slight shrug. "You don't talk much, do you?" Isuri continued, undeterred. "That's okay. Many find comfort in silence. On my world, we communicate primarily through light patterns, and vocal speech is considered intimate." The crystalline being's body pulsed with soft blue light. "I've never met a human before. Is it true that your species mastered space travel less than 2 centuries ago?" Maya nodded once, then gathered her training gear and headed for the door. "Good luck at the assessment," Isuri called after her, the crystalline being's body flashing with encouraging patterns of amber and gold. The Academy's physical assessment arena was a marvel of xenobiological engineering, designed to test the capabilities of any known sentient species on equal footing. Gravitational fields could be adjusted, atmosphere composition modified, and temperature regulated to create optimal or challenging conditions for each cadet. Today, the arena was set to neutral parameters, standard gravity, breathable atmosphere for most oxygen-dependent species, and moderate temperature. The true test would come from the challenges themselves. Cadet Verex was already holding court among a group of admirers when Maya arrived. The saurian's powerful tail swished behind him as he demonstrated his natural agility, leaping nearly 4 meters into the air and landing with perfect balance. "That's nothing," he boasted. "On assessment day at the Saurian Elite Academy, I broke the all-time record for the combat obstacle course. My species evolved as apex predators for a reason." His yellow eyes fixed on Maya as she quietly took her position at the starting line of the first assessment station. "Watch and learn, Earther. This is what a real warrior looks like." The first test was a straightforward evaluation of raw strength. Cadets were required to lift progressively heavier weights until they reached their maximum capacity. The Taurians and Quantari dominated this event, their massive frames designed for planets with crushing gravity. When Maya's turn came, Verex and his entourage gathered to watch, clearly expecting entertainment. "Try not to hurt yourself, human," Verex called. "Medical staff is already overworked today." Maya approached the weight station without acknowledging the comment. She began with the standard starting weight, 100 kilograms, lifting it with visible effort but proper form. As the weights increased, she continued methodically, her face betraying no emotion beyond focused concentration. When she finally reached her limit at 250 kilograms, impressive for a human but unremarkable compared to many other species, Drill Sergeant Zoran marked her score with a dismissive grunt. "Minimal acceptable standard for a species with your gravity profile," he noted. "Move on to agility assessment." The agility course was where Maya's true abilities began to emerge. While she didn't possess the natural jumping capacity of the saurians or the multiple limbs of the hexapods, she moved through the obstacle course with a fluid efficiency that drew attention. Her movements were economical, precise, each one flowing into the next with no hesitation or wasted energy. An insectoid cadet named Kellen, whose compound eyes missed nothing, began recording notes on Maya's performance. "Interesting," the chittering being muttered. "Her technique compensates for physiological limitations. Most efficient human movement pattern, I've observed." By the third assessment, combat reflexes, Maya had drawn a small crowd of observers. Cadets were required to intercept and deflect training drones that fired harmless but impact-registering energy bolts at increasing speeds and from unpredictable angles. Most cadets relied on natural advantages, the Vorelians' ability to partially dematerialize, the Lycarians' light-bending properties, the Saurians' lightning reflexes. Maya, however, seemed to anticipate the drone's movements through pure observation and positioning, rarely needing to make last-second adjustments. When one drone malfunctioned, accelerating to unsafe speeds, several instructors moved to shut down the system before they could intervene. The drone dived directly at Maya's head. In a single motion that few could follow with the naked eye, she sidestepped, reached up, and caught the drone with one hand, immediately disabling its propulsion system. The arena fell silent. "Did you see that?" whispered a hexapod cadet to their neighbor. "Impossible," Verix hissed. "She must have augmentations we can't detect." Maya placed the disabled drone on the assessment table and returned to her position, expression unchanged. Drill Sergeant Zoran narrowed all four eyes. "Weapons proficiency next," he barked, but his voice carried a new undertone, something approximating curiosity. Rumors began circulating through the academy that evening. Some cadets claimed they'd seen the human disassemble and reassemble a plasma rifle in under 8 seconds during weapons assessment. Others swore she had completed the endurance course without breaking a sweat, despite the punishing conditions. Maya, for her part, spent the evening alone in the training facilities after hours, practicing hand-to-hand combat forms against a shadow opponent. Her movements were a blend of various earth martial arts, modified for zero gravity and multiple-limbed opponents. She worked silently, methodically, hour after hour, until her gray uniform was dark with sweat. When she finally returned to her quarters, Ixori was still awake, the crystalline being's body pulsing with the soft patterns that indicated deep thought. "The others are talking about you," Ixori noted, light patterns shifting to convey curiosity. "They say you're not what you appear to be." Maya shrugged, retrieving her notebook and making a few brief notes. "Verix is particularly upset. He claims you must be using illegal enhancements." Ixori's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been amusement. "He can't accept that a human could outperform him in anything." Maya continued writing for a moment before closing her notebook. She glanced at Ixori and offered the barest hint of a smile, the first expression of emotion she'd shown since arriving. "You know," Ixori continued, "in crystalline society, we believe that those who listen more than they speak eventually hear the universe's secrets." The being's form glowed with warm amber light. "Perhaps you already have." The next morning, the Academy's central communication system announced a special training exercise. All first-year cadets were to prepare for a survival assessment on Zereth 9, a largely uninhabited planet known for its hostile environment and dangerous indigenous fauna. Each cadet will be dropped at a different location, Drill Sergeant Zoran explained as they gathered in the briefing hall. "Your objective is simple. Survive for 72 hours and make your way to the extraction point. You will be provided with basic survival equipment appropriate to your species' needs, but no weapons or advanced technology." Holographic images of Zereth 9's terrain appeared above the briefing table: acidic swamps, electrical storm plains, dense fungal forests, and rocky highlands teeming with predatory creatures. Zereth 9's wildlife is particularly enthusiastic about meeting new species. Zoran continued, his facial ridges forming what passed for a Taurian smile. "Most notably, you may encounter Carvon striders, 350-kilogram predators that can outrun most sentient species, or, if you're especially unlucky, a Thornak, the apex predator weighing in at 400 kilograms with natural armor and toxic spines." Images of the creatures appeared, causing several cadets to shift uncomfortably. The strider resembled a 6-legged tiger with armored plates along its spine. The Thornak looked like a nightmarish combination of rhinoceros and scorpion, with massive forward horns and a venomous tail. "Not to worry," Zoran added with obvious insincerity. "We'll be monitoring your vital signs. If you're about to die, we'll probably extract you in time." Verix leaned toward Maya, his scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile or a snarl. "Try not to call for help too quickly. Human." It's embarrassing when your species needs rescue within the first hour. Maya's gaze remained fixed on the holographic creatures, studying their anatomical structures with quiet intensity. The transport to Zereth 9 was a tense affair. Most cadets checked and rechecked their survival kits, discussed strategies with their fellow species members, or reviewed xenobiological data on the planet's hazards. Maya sat alone, eyes closed, seemingly meditating amid the chaos. Kellen, the insectoid observer, chittered thoughtfully as he watched her. Conserving energy, he noted to a fellow cadet. Smart approach. Most expend valuable resources on anxiety before the challenge even begins. The deployment pods, individual drop capsules designed to land cadets safely but separately across Zereth 9's surface, were loaded one by one. As Maya entered hers, Drill Sergeant Zoran paused by the hatch. "Last chance to speak up if you're not ready." "Cadet Reyes," he said, his voice uncharacteristically neutral. "No shame in acknowledging when a challenge exceeds your capabilities." Maya met his four-eyed gaze steadily and nodded once. "Ready." Zoran sealed her pod with what might have been a thoughtful expression. "Interesting," he muttered as he moved to the next cadet. Maya's pod streaked through Zereth 9's upper atmosphere, heat shields glowing as friction built up around the small craft. Through the viewport, she observed the rapidly approaching landscape. She was headed for the fungal forests, a dense ecosystem where massive mushroom-like growths created a canopy 50 meters above the ground. The landing was rough but controlled, the pod's shock absorbers straining as they compensated for the impact. When the hatch opened, Maya emerged into an alien twilight. Phosphorescent spores drifted through the air, providing dim illumination beneath the towering fungal structures. The air was thick with moisture and the scent of organic decay. Maya consulted her basic equipment: water purifier, nutrient bars, thermal blanket, and a simple compass calibrated to the extraction point's location. No communications device, no weapons, not even a basic utility knife. This was a true survival test. She oriented herself using the compass and began moving immediately, her footsteps nearly silent on the spongy forest floor. Unlike many cadets who would hunker down to establish a base camp, Maya seemed intent on covering ground while daylight remained. Her progress was methodical but swift. She avoided the obvious paths, instead choosing routes that provided cover and multiple escape options. When toxic spore clouds drifted across her path, she tied her thermal blanket as a makeshift filtration mask and pressed forward. By nightfall, she had covered nearly 15 kilometers, an impressive distance given the challenging terrain. Finding a secure location, a hollow at the base of a massive fungal trunk elevated several meters off the ground, she established a minimal camp. No fire, which would attract attention. Just the thermal blanket for warmth and a carefully positioned monitoring system made from reflective strips torn from her survival kit packaging. The first test came just before dawn. The sound of heavy breathing and the snap of secondary growth alerted Maya seconds before a Carvan strider emerged from the underbrush. The massive predator's 6 legs carried it with surprising silence for its size, but Maya was already moving, sliding down from her elevated position to put the fungal trunk between herself and the creature. The strider snarled, its sensory organs detecting her despite the visual barrier. It circled, trying to flank her position. Maya circled as well, maintaining the massive trunk as cover while she assessed her options. When the strider finally charged, it chose the direct approach, leaping onto the trunk itself to scramble over the obstacle. Maya waited until the precise moment when the creature's weight was fully committed to its climbing position, then darted in the opposite direction, using the trunk's curve to accelerate her movement. The strider, realizing its mistake, abandoned its climb and dropped back to the ground, immediately giving chase. This was exactly what Maya had anticipated. As the predator closed the distance, she sprinted toward a narrow gap between 2 fungal growths, too small for the strider to follow. The creature, recognizing it would lose its prey, made a desperate lunge. Maya, sensing the attack coming, dropped into a slide that carried her beneath the narrow opening just as the strider crashed into the unyielding fungal structures. The impact momentarily stunned the massive predator. In that brief window of opportunity, Maya did something unexpected. Instead of continuing her escape, she reversed direction, charged directly at the disoriented creature, and using its own bulk as a launching point, executed a perfect judo throw that sent the 350-kilogram predator crashing into a nearby rock formation. The strider, more startled than injured, scrambled to its feet and retreated, unwilling to continue pursuit of such unpredictable prey. Maya calmly retrieved her scattered equipment and continued toward the extraction point as if nothing unusual had occurred. Unknown to her, the entire encounter had been captured by the Academy's monitoring drones. In the command center, several instructors replayed the footage with stunned expressions. "Did she just throw a carve-on strider?" asked an assistant instructor, his tentacles writhing in disbelief. Drill Sergeant Zoran watched the replay with narrowed eyes. "Replay that sequence at 1/4 speed," he ordered. "Focus on her positioning and leverage points." As the footage played in slow motion, Zoran's expression shifted from skepticism to something approaching respect. "Perfect biomechanical understanding," he muttered. She used the creature's own momentum and mass distribution against it. The next 48 hours saw Maya navigate through increasingly dangerous terrain. She crossed acid swamps by creating stepping stones from fungal caps, avoided electrical storm plains by timing her movements between discharge cycles, and twice more evaded predators through superior positioning and environmental awareness. Other cadets were struggling. Emergency extractions had already been initiated for 3 who had encountered situations beyond their capabilities. Several more were injured but continuing. A few, like Varix, were performing admirably, but still relying heavily on their natural evolutionary advantages. By the dawn of the 3rd day, Maya had covered over 40 kilometers and was within striking distance of the extraction point. The final approach, however, presented the greatest challenge, a rocky highland that served as territory for a mated pair of Thornax. The command center buzzed with activity as monitors tracked the remaining cadets. Most attention was focused on Maya's feed as she surveyed the highland territory from a concealed position. "She'll have to go around," one instructor noted. "Even Saurians and Taurians are avoiding direct confrontation with the Thornax." Zoran grunted non-committally, his eyes fixed on Maya's methodical mapping of the terrain. She was drawing something in the dirt, what appeared to be an analysis of the Thornax patrol patterns and territorial boundaries. "What is she planning?" Zoran muttered. The answer came as Maya began moving again, not around the highland territory, but directly through it. Her path, however, was anything but direct. She used the rocky outcroppings as cover, timing her movements to coincide with the Thornax patrol gaps. For nearly an hour, she made steady progress without detection. The extraction point, a clearing where transport shuttles would land, was visible in the distance when disaster struck. A young hexapod cadet, injured and disoriented, stumbled into the open barely 50 meters from Maya's position. The nearest Thornax immediately charged. Sensing easy prey, the hexapod froze in terror, its 6 limbs locked in a defensive posture that would provide little protection against the armored predator. Maya acted without hesitation. She broke cover, sprinting directly toward the intersection point between the Thornax and the terrified cadet. In the command center, even Zoran leaned forward in alarm. "Extract them now," an assistant shouted. "They'll both be killed." "Wait," Zoran ordered, his voice tense but controlled. "Something's happening." As the Thornax closed in, Maya reached the hexapod and pushed the cadet roughly aside, directly into a narrow crevice in the rocks, a space too small for the charging predator to follow. In the same fluid motion, she pivoted to face the Thornax head-on. The creature, now fully committed to its charge and irritated at losing its initial prey, redirected toward Maya. 400 kilograms of armored fury bore down on the seemingly fragile human. Maya held her ground until the last possible moment. As the Thornak lowered its horns for the killing blow, she sidestepped with preternatural precision, grabbed one of the massive horns, and used the creature's own momentum to guide its charge directly into a boulder. The impact was tremendous, causing the Thornak to momentarily stagger before it could recover. Maya maintained her grip on the horn, planted her feet, rotated her hips, and executed a perfect shoulder throw that sent the massive creature tumbling down the rocky slope. The entire command center fell silent as the 400-kilogram apex predator crashed through underbrush and rocks before coming to rest nearly 30 meters below. Dazed but alive. "Impossible," someone whispered. Zoran replayed the footage again, frame by frame. "Look at her technique," he said, voice uncharacteristically reverent. "Perfect weight distribution, optimal leverage point identification, precise timing. This isn't enhanced strength. This is pure skill." The second Thornak, hearing its mate's distress, was already charging toward Maya's position. Without missing a beat, she helped the hexapod cadet from the crevice and pointed toward the extraction point. "What about you?" the cadet's translator squawked. Maya just nodded toward the landing zone. "Go," as the hexapod limped towards his safety. Maya turned to face the second Thornak. This one approached more cautiously, having witnessed its mate's defeat. It circled, looking for weakness, its venomous tail poised to strike. Several other cadets, having reached vantage points overlooking the confrontation, stopped to watch the unfolding drama. Among them was Verex, his reptilian features frozen in disbelief. "She's insane," he hissed to a nearby Lysarian. "No one fights a Thornak without weapons." The crystalline being, Ixori, pulsed with patterns of deep blue. "Perhaps she has weapons we cannot see." The second Thornak attacked with a sweeping tail strike rather than a frontal charge. Maya ducked beneath the venomous appendage and darted inside the creature's guard, placing herself in the dangerous space between its front legs and horned head. The Thornak twisted, trying to bring its weapons to bear, but Maya moved with it, always maintaining a position that minimized the creature's offensive options. When it reared up to crush her beneath its mass, she rolled forward between its legs, then sprang up behind it. The frustrated predator spun with surprising speed for its size, its tail whipping around in a potentially lethal arc. Maya, instead of retreating, stepped into the attack, caught the tail just behind the venomous bulb, and used the creature's rotational momentum to swing herself onto its armored back. The Thornak bucked and twisted, trying to dislodge the unexpected passenger. Maya held firm, working her way forward until she reached the sensitive nerve cluster at the base of the creature's skull. With a precisely targeted strike, she hit the pressure point that temporarily disrupted the Thornak's motor functions. The massive beast staggered, then collapsed onto its side, immobilized but unharmed. Maya calmly dismounted and resumed her journey toward the extraction point, leaving the stunned predator to recover once the pressure point effects wore off. By the time she reached the landing zone, a crowd of cadets had gathered. They parted silently as she approached, expressions ranging from awe to disbelief to frank reassessment. Drill Sergeant Zoran was waiting at the transport shuttle, his 4 eyes fixed intently on Maya as she approached. "Cadet Reyes," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent assembly. "Would you care to explain how a human from a medium-gravity world with no apparent augmentations just defeated 2 apex predators in hand-to-hand combat? For the first time since her arrival at the academy." Maya spoke in a normal volume, her voice calm and clear. "Leverage, positioning, and timing, sir. The principles of combat are universal, regardless of species or scale." "And where exactly did you learn these principles?" "Cadet?" Maya straightened to attention. "From my grandfather, sir. General Thomas Reyes, Earth Defense Force. Retired." A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. Even Zoran's facial ridges lifted in surprise. General Reyes, the strategist who developed the counter-offensive at the Battle of Europa? Yes, sir. He began training me when I was 5 years old. No enhancements, no shortcuts, just discipline and fundamentals. And the silence, Zoran pressed. You've barely spoken since arriving. Maya's expression remained neutral. My grandfather taught me that those who speak the loudest often have the most to prove and the least to show for it. I prefer to let actions communicate worth. Zoran held her gaze for a long moment before his facial ridges arranged themselves in what passed for a Taurian smile. Well, Cadet Reyes, I believe your actions have communicated quite effectively today. The return journey to Trinivir was markedly different from the deployment. Cadets who had previously ignored or mocked Maya now kept a respectful distance, watching her with newfound awareness. Verex and his entourage were conspicuously silent. Kellen, the observant insectoid, approached her cautiously. Your technique against the Thornak, he chittered, compound eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. The pressure point strike. Would you be willing to demonstrate the precise location? Maya considered for a moment, then nodded, using her own neck to indicate the nerve cluster positioning. Ixori joined them, crystalline form pulsing with warm olden light. I knew there was more to you than others saw. The being chimed. In my culture, we have a saying, the deepest waters reflect the fewest stars, but hold the greatest treasures. Maya offered a small smile in return, the expression still rare but genuine. Upon returning to the academy, Maya found herself the subject of intense speculation and revised assessment. Instructors who had dismissed her as barely meeting minimum standards now reviewed her previous performances with new eyes. Fellow cadets who had ignored her began seeking her out for training advice or simple proximity, as if her abilities might somehow transfer through association. A week after the Zereth 9 exercise, Maya was summoned to the Academy's administrative offices. She entered to find not only Drill Sergeant Zoran, but also the Academy's commanding officer, Admiral Lirash, a Vorelian whose gaseous form swirled with the deep purple patterns that indicated formal proceedings. Cadet Reyes, the Admiral's translated voice emerged from the communications unit at the center of the conference table. Your performance on Zereth 9 has prompted a comprehensive review of your evaluation metrics since arriving at this academy. Maya stood at attention, expression neutral. After analyzing all available data, including previously overlooked details from your initial assessments, the Academy's leadership has reached a unanimous conclusion. The Admiral's gaseous form pulsed with what might have been enthusiasm. You have already demonstrated mastery of the core first-year curriculum and significant portions of the advanced training program. Zoran stepped forward, his massive frame somehow less intimidating than before. Put simply, Cadet Reyes, you're overqualified for basic training. Your grandfather taught you well, perhaps too well for our standard program. We are therefore accelerating your graduation timeline. Admiral Lirash continued, you will bypass the remaining first-year curriculum and move directly into specialized training with the Galactic Rapid Response Unit, effective immediately. Maya blinked, the first sign of surprise she'd shown since arriving at the academy. Sir, I thank you. Don't thank us yet, Zoran rumbled, though without malice. The GRU training program makes our survival exercise look like recreational activity. But if anyone is prepared for it, you are. Admiral Lirash's form shimmered with formal violet patterns. Additionally, we are awarding you the Trinivir Badge of Excellence. The first time in Academy history, it has been presented to a first-year cadet. Your actions in protecting a fellow cadet while demonstrating exceptional combat prowess exemplify the highest traditions of the Intergalactic Defense Force. Later that evening, as Maya packed her few belongings for transfer to the GRU training facility, Ixori watched with crystalline patterns that suggested both happiness and regret. We had only just begun to know you. The being chimed softly. Though I suppose that's always the way with exceptional individuals. They never remain in one place for long. Maya paused in her packing and retrieved her worn notebook. She wrote something on a page, tore it carefully from the binding, and handed it to Ixori. The crystalline being's light patterns shifted to express confusion, then brightened as they understood. Your private communication frequency. Your inviting correspondence. Maya nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I am honored. Ixori pulsed with warm gold light. And I shall use it sparingly, knowing your preference for meaningful silence over empty words. The transport to the Gar-U facility was scheduled for early the following morning. As Maya made her way to the departure bay, she found the corridor lined with cadets and instructors, not in formal formation, but gathered nonetheless to witness her departure. Varric stood among them, his reptilian features arranged in what appeared to be grudging respect. As Maya passed, he inclined his head slightly, the saurian equivalent of a salute between equals. Kellen chittered excitedly from nearby. I have completed my analysis of your combat techniques. The insectoid called. With your permission, I would like to incorporate the principles into my xenobiology thesis. Maya nodded her acceptance as she continued toward the transport. At the boarding ramp, Drill Sergeant Zoran waited with uncharacteristic stillness. Cadet Reyes, he said as she approached, before you depart, I owe you something rarely offered by a Taurian instructor. He placed his massive fist against his chest in the formal gesture of his species. An apology. I misjudged you based on preconceived notions about your species and your quiet demeanor. In doing so, I failed in my duty as an instructor. Maya shook her head slightly. No apology needed, sir. Assumptions must be challenged through demonstration, not declaration. Zoran's facial ridges arranged themselves in genuine appreciation. Your grandfather's wisdom continues to speak through you. He straightened to formal attention. The GRRU is gaining an exceptional warrior today. Remember your training here, but more importantly, remember the discipline and wisdom that brought you to this point. Maya returned the formal salute, then turned and boarded the transport without looking back. As the vessel lifted off, carrying her toward the next chapter of her journey, she took her usual seat by the viewport. From this vantage point, she could see the assembled cadets watching her departure, beings from across the galaxy who had begun as strangers, then become skeptics, and finally transformed into something approaching comrades. For the first time since arriving at Trinivir, Maya felt something beyond her usual focused determination. A sense of accomplishment. Yes, but also something more profound, a validation not just of her abilities, but of her grandfather's philosophy. Actions spoke louder than words. Results mattered more than reputation. Discipline overcame prejudice. As the academy receded from view and the transport accelerated toward the stars, Maya retrieved her notebook one last time. In careful script, she wrote a single sentence. Silence is not the absence of strength, but its foundation. Then she closed the book, tucked it away, and turned her attention to the journey ahead, to new challenges that would require not just physical prowess, but the quiet, unshakable core of discipline that had become her greatest weapon and most defining characteristic. In the vast expanse of space, as countless stars streaked past the viewport, Maya Reyes, the quietest cadet, the human anomaly, the warrior who let actions speak louder than words, allowed herself one more small smile before returning to the composed silence that had become her signature and her strength.